Hi, Dr. Ehrman. One of the things I want to talk to you about is your contention against the burial tomb. Now, obviously, we have quotes from the gospel, which you're aware of, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, promoting a tomb narrative. Obviously, in the Gospel of Peter, it contains a tomb narrative. We also have Celsus that is interacting with the tomb narrative, and we have reports from the Jewish sources. Obviously, Tertullian, Justin, they're interacting with Jews and they're getting some information. And we even have the Toldus Jesu.
I'm sorry. What Jewish sources do we have for the tomb?
So we have Justin Martyr.
Sorry, I'm not supposed to ask questions. I'm just clarify your question for me, please.
Give specifics, not generalize. That might help us out a little bit. I'll pause the time on that. I'll give you an extra 15 seconds to give specifics on that, please.
Okay. So in Matthew 28, he says a polemic where the Jews came by night and stole him away. Justin Martyr, in his dialogue with Tropher, proclaimed that the Jews were promoting a godless and lawless heresy, that there was a Galilean seeing who we crucified, but the disciples stole him away. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Toldus Jesu, where the cabbage farmer heard about the but what we see.
So let me respond to that as a question. The first two sources you cited are not Jewish sources. We don't have any Jewish sources from the period that talk about the tomb of Jesus. The Toldus Jesu, as you probably know, is medieval.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
So it's a very critical account of Jesus that's very attacks Jesus and the stories about him. It's a complete counter narrative to the entire gospel. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the Toldus is going to help you very much for your case about counter narratives.
So the question is, we have three statements from Celsus that is interacting with the tomb argument. He doesn't, while he's trying to exploit weaknesses in the gospel arguments, he doesn't doubt the tomb. He actually makes fun of Christians, like, you're making fun of the people in Crete, but you guys worship the thing. So the question is, we have the four gospels that are referencing, and even though you believe they came out later, I'm assuming you would assume they come from earlier sources. Everywhere we look, there is this tomb narrative. So how do you rule out all those indications or lead that reference a tomb narrative? So you have the four gospels. Justin and Tertullian are at least communicating with Jews, and that's what the information they're passing on. You have Celsus. Obviously, you have an interesting allusion in the Satyricon about the tale of the Ephesian. You have the Nazareth inscription. So everything seems to point to a tomb.
What, the Satyricon? Petronius doesn't say anything about an empty tomb.
Well, there's a tale of the Ephesian widow that.
That is not about Jesus. Have you read that?
Well, what I'm saying is it's an illusion.
It's a very interesting tale. It's very funny too, but it's gallows humor because it's all about how Romans did not bury people on the day they got crucified.
So the question is, we do have all these references.
Okay, so when you say all of these references, we should think about what the sources of information are. So what historians do is they try to figure out, how many sources of information do we have? Are they near to the time itself? Are they independent of each other? Do they corroborate each other, et cetera, et cetera? And so you do that. So when it comes to the empty tomb, it is never mentioned by the Apostle Paul. It is never mentioned by any of the other authors of the New Testament.
But Paul does say he was buried.
Yeah, but being buried just means that they did something with his remains.
Wouldn't that be consistent with the empty tomb?
Yes, and be consistent with them being thrown into a mass burial spot or being put into a ditch and have dirt covered over you. Okay. It doesn't say anything about an empty tomb.
And so the four gospel accounts.
So you got the four gospel accounts. And Mark is the source, yes, but they're not independent sources. That's my point. So Matthew and Luke got it from Mark. So you don't have four independent sources. Justin talks about the memoirs of the apostles. He had the Gospels. Tertullian calls them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and he read them. Both of them are basing their views about Jesus on the Gospels. So you don't have all of these sources. You have sources that are reliant on an earlier source that we have. You don't have any mention of an empty tomb until about the year 70 by somebody who is living in, somebody who was not living in Israel, gives no evidence he'd ever been in Israel, let alone Jerusalem, gives no evidence he talked to any eyewitnesses. He is saying that there was an empty tomb. That's our source. So maybe 40 years later, somebody knows that the women went to the tomb, found it empty. But the other point to consider is that when historians look at their sources, they look for consistency. And the empty tomb is a big problem for people interested in consistency. How many women go there? What do they see there? Was the stone rolled away? Or was it not rolled away? You can just go on and on. So if you have all of these inconsistencies about this story, and the story doesn't originate until 40 years after the event, how reliable is it? So that's my, I'm sorry, I'm not asking a question. I'm just saying, that's a rhetorical question.
Oh, Stephen, did you have something?
No, it's you. It's on you, bud.
Oh, okay. No, I saw you pop up. So I got a question, Dr. Ehrman. Setting aside authorship, because I know we talked about that last time. Now, all our references to where the Gospels were published, because remember, the churches did receive the publication, so there was a physical transaction. So when we go to church leadership or those in a position to oversee the records, the information that's coming in, they all report. And so remember, these are officials overseeing these churches by the apostles, say that Matthew was published in Judea. Now, the question I have for you is, well, yes, I have Eusebius, I have Jerome, I have Irenaeus. My question for you is, who is your ancient source that says Mark was published in 70 AD and where and who? I mean, what church did it first go to? How does it end up at the Church of Rome? Paul's letters, he's obviously sending them out and they're from Paul. And we find those in the churches. We find Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in Rome and all these churches who delivered. So who's your Pisistratus, essentially, who's delivering these texts to the churches? Because the churches who received the publication, and those would be the witnesses who received it. So whether they received it in 70 AD or 120, did it go first to Rome or was it at Ephesus? Where did Mark first show up?
The answer is we don't know.
But the churches did receive it. So they did receive this text.
We don't know which churches received it. We don't know we don't know which churches first had it. We don't know about its location. We don't.
But Irenaeus, who is quoting from Mark, you would say in the 2nd century, his church eventually received it. So the question is,
they get put in circulation, but we don't know where it started. Well, normally what happened in the ancient world is when an author wrote a book, he would circulate it among his friends or among people who might be interested in it. And if he wanted copies, they'd have copies made. And if other people wanted copies would be made. And so it would circulate. But if you have the later copies, for Mark, for example, we don't have a full copy of Mark until about the year 375. So at least 300 years after it was written. But based on that copy, you don't know where it originated.
Correct. But the churches themselves, if they received it, so if the bishop, Clement of Rome, if he got a text from Paul, obviously he's a witness to that transaction. So at one point, the texts have to show up. And the question for you is, what's your mechanism for the circulate? They can't just show up out of nowhere. Someone has to.
As I said, then people make copies, and then
who are the people? Who are the people that got it to the Church of Rome?
Well, we don't. Clement never quotes the Book of Mark, Clement of Rome. So I don't know if he had the Book of Mark or not.
No, but he did get the letters of Paul, so that was a physical transaction. And in Paul's churches, they did receive Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So
no, they didn't. What makes you think that?
Well, they're quoting from it.
Paul never quotes Matthew, Mark, Luke.
No. I'm talking the churches of Paul. So Rome, obviously, after Paul died.
Yeah. By the mid 2nd century or so, people do have access to the Gospels in various parts of the Roman Empire. That's right.
So after 70 A.D., the apostles are gone, the disciples, the followers. Who is organizing? Pisistratus distributed the Homeric text throughout. Who is your Pisistratus to orchestrate this after all the apostles are dead?
This will have to be your last question here, Jonathan. Then Dr. Ehrman can answer it.
We don't know.
Well, so my question is to you: if we have all these churches who did receive the publication at some point in time, where is the rebuttal testimony coming? Why are we doubting their testimony if we can't provide an alternative hypothesis to say, hey, so-and-so and so-and-so distributed it out? If Rome is a witness to that text and they have it in their congregation and they're reading it to the people, it had to show up at one time. And if they're saying that Peter authorized Mark's version to go in there, and
we don't know that the Romans are saying that early on.
Well, no. What we have is their ambassadors, their bishops who oversee the records in these churches.
I don't know what you're. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any record of bishops in Rome overseeing records.
Okay, so we're gonna have to.
And if they did, I don't know why that would demonstrate the resurrection.
No.
The distribution of a book has no bearing on the truth claims of a book.
Correct.
There are millions of copies of Mein Kampf in circulation. The fact they're in circulation doesn't say anything about the truth claims in the book. Okay. So if you've got the Gospels circulating through the Roman Empire, that has no bearing on the truth claims of the Gospels.
No, correct. And the point that I was...
I gave us an extra. I gave us extra on that. I promise I gave us extra on that one. So we're going to have to let Dr. Ehrman ask the questions now. I'm trying to be conscientious of everybody's time. And this is the last 10 minutes, folks. So any last minute questions coming in, you got 10 minutes to turn them in. All right. And then we're going to your questions for the panelists. Dr. Ehrman, I will start the time. You got 10 minutes to cross-examine Jonathan.
Okay. I don't know that I'll need 10 minutes, but I'm still a little bit puzzled, Jonathan, because it sounds like your entire argument that Jesus was raised from the dead is the fact that we don't have any Roman authors in the first 100 years or so trying to disprove it. Is that correct?
Well, no. What I established for my case is several things. First, there was this knowledge that they understood how to falsify this. We know that the Roman Empire, Herods, they knew how to expose conspiracies out of these groups. They knew how to investigate them. They suppressed a number of uprisings like these groups. And so what I'm talking about is we have a lot of information. It's not like we have very limited information. We have all these different philosophers and educated looking into the question, and they can't explain it. It does raise a level of curiosity. It's kind of strange that you would think that they knew how to falsify these things, and with Jesus, they are stumped.
Okay. So now your view that they're stumped is the fact. I mean, I think you just, in a more elongated sense, said what I said, that your evidence that Jesus was raised from the dead is the fact that you don't have Roman authors trying to refute it.
No, we have all these people that are trying to refute it, and they can't.
Oh, so which of these people are trying to refute it? Herod, for example. Where does Herod try to refute it?
Well, no, he doesn't. So
how about Pilate? Where does Pilate try to refute it?
Well, he would have to look into the event.
How about Plutarch? Where does Plutarch try to refute it?
Well, Plutarch doesn't. He brings up a number of people.
You said these people wanted to refute it, and I'm asking what your evidence is that they wanted to refute it, because they don't mention it.
Well, Paul, he goes before Agrippa and gives him an opportunity in his official capacity to falsify the narrative.
You're taking the book of Acts as a historically reliable account of what happened with Paul before Agrippa.
Julian the emperor took it as a historical account.
When did Julian the emperor live?
He lived in he served from 361 to 363, but he would be in a better position.
What was his source of information about early Christianity?
He had lots of information. I mean, he went to the schools of Athens. He had obviously.
What's the sources of information about Christianity?
Well, he was a Roman emperor, so he had Roman records. Wouldn't he have?
Julian was raised as a Christian.
Correct.
And he learned about Christianity from the Christian church. He got his information from the Bible.
Correct. But he was also well studied in the education.
Are you saying that Julian the apostate believed in the resurrection of Jesus?
No, he didn't. He wrote against the Galileans, but he had access. Well, it's similar.
What's your point then?
It's similar to Maximinus in 311 AD.
I don't understand what this has to do with the resurrection.
Well, they would have had access to sources of it. They're in a better position to inspect the information than we are today.
What sources do you think they had that we don't have?
Well, Maximinus would have had access to the records in Caesarea. He controlled the eastern part of the empire. And if there was information, positive or negative to Christianity, there would have been a report. He had access to the official records in Caesarea.
Okay.
And so we see by his actions that he produces a forged report. Why would the Roman emperor need to do that if he could just produce something that showed he had historians that could have looked into the matter?
Jonathan, we don't have historians who are looking into the matter. What are they going to look into? They can't. How are they going to disverify a report from 300 years earlier about a tomb being empty? How are they going to? Are they going to go to the site and look to see if there's an empty tomb someplace?
No, but they would have information on the events. And
whose information?
Well, Pilate would have had information, and that the point of the quote from Cicero.
Jonathan, how many people do you think Pilate crucified?
Thousands.
And you think he had records about where each one was buried?
Well, in the aftermath of the disciples coming together and to promote their narrative, if the story or if the accounts in the Gospels hold up, that everyone was out there, they had guards over there. He's obviously, if Pilate understood that there's Samaritans going up to look for sacred artifacts of Moses, he would also have information on Judea. The Roman Empire had spies all over the place. And Dr. Ehrman, you understand that they had information coming to them. This is why Herod.
I'll tell you, I don't think that's true. No, I don't think that's true. Pilate did not have information about Christians. He's probably never even heard of the Christians. There's no evidence that he did.
So in the province,
you're imagining that Christianity is this big uprising, and he's got to squelch it. And
even if it was 500 people, he would have to look into the matter and squash it. I mean, there was 7,000 people in the Bacchus conspiracy. There was only 7,000 people. How many Galilean worshipers did he kill? Anything that looked and smelled like an uprising. And the
it's weird that we don't have any record of it. We have records of Pilate's reign from Josephus, who doesn't say anything about it.
Well, what we do have two reports from Justin and Tertullian.
They are Christian authors living. Justin's from the year 150, living in Rome.
They could have been disputed.
So, Jonathan, I don't know if you've read these Pilate materials yourself, but
they're forged. They're forged. The Gospel of Nicodemus. I contend that they're forged.
They're forged. Okay, Pilate, but you're basing your argument on forged documents.
No, the actions of Maximinus in 311 AD definitely suggest that there were actual documents. Why is he putting out a forged copy? He's obviously trying to respond to the Christians' request to release the records. And what does he do? Why does he put, if there wasn't actual imperial records that existed?
Oh, because you know what his thing, he wrote, I mean, he had this actual Pilate put in circulation in order to help persecute the Christians, right? He had to forge it because he wanted it to say what he wanted it to say from Pilate's point of view. And that may be why the Christian Acts of the Pilates were later forged in order to counter those, to say these are the actual Acts of Pilate.
So
Maximin would not have been supporting the resurrection.
No, he wouldn't have. But if the original records, at Caesarea had information that was negative to Christianity, if there was something like, we looked in the records and there's nothing there, well, he wouldn't have had to produce a forged one.
There's nothing there.
So why produce a?
How's that evidence? If there's nothing there, what's the evidence?
Well,
I just don't get it.
Well, why would you have to? The thing is,
he didn't have to forge something that was already written by Pilate. He's circulating something that is a forgery to show what Pilate really knew about Jesus, and it's condemning of Christianity. It's in order to condemn Christianity. It's not to counter some kind of record in Caesarea from Pilate. There's no such thing. Origen lived in Caesarea, and in the 230s or so, he was intimately familiar with the Christian records in Caesarea. He says nothing about this.
No, but we do have two earlier reports from Tertullian, who was familiar with Roman records.
Was he?
Justin,
what makes you think that Tertullian knew Roman records?
Well, part of my opening is, since you did have
what access did he have to Roman records, Tertullian? Well, where does he talk about that?
Well, he talks about the Acts of Pilate. He talks about the census records.
Where does he talk about having access? Where did he get his access? Did he travel to Rome?
Well, Justin was in Rome. His father was a centurion, Tertullian. Eusebius does say he was well educated in Roman laws. These are well educated men of the ancient world. Just like today, they had access. There was stuff posted on the forum.
They may have been well educated. Neither one of them says anything about what you're talking about. So I don't know how much you've read Justin or Tertullian. Tertullian especially is very lengthy. He's got oh my God, a lot of writing. Justin, we just have 3 writings from, and they don't talk about these records. They do mention the Acts of Pilate. Almost every scholar who's an expert on Justin and Tertullian thinks that, in fact, they're basing this on rumors. They don't have something that Pilate actually wrote. We don't have any indication that Pilate wrote anything about Jesus. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I'm done.
Okay.
My question is, can we go to listeners' questions?
Granted. All right, let's jump right in. Thank you so much for those that have brought your questions to the table. We'll start at the beginning. I'm going to work back and work our way down to the most recent. This is for Dr. Ehrman. If there were no resurrection in appearances, how do you explain the genesis of Christianity? How did it begin without the resurrection? Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I answer it at some length in my book, both my book, How Jesus Became God, and my book, The Triumph of Christianity. My view of this is that the disciples of Jesus were not expecting him to get crucified. He was crucified, and it shattered their hopes that he'd be the Messiah. But sometime after that, some of them had a vision or visions of Jesus. They became the followers of Jesus. At least Peter, probably Mary Magdalene, later Paul, believed they saw Jesus alive later. And they told others. They believed it, and they started spreading the word. They believed it. So it absolutely is based on reports of Jesus' resurrection that Christianity started on.
All right. There's another. It's a 2-part. I got this one in from the side, so I kind of had to recreate it. So stay with me. It's part 1, part 2 here. I believe this is for Dr. Ehrman. My question is this: if historians routinely infer unobservable causes, such as intentions, conspiracies, and psychological states, and lost sources based on explanatory power rather than direct empirical, switch part 2, access, why is divine agency uniquely excluded a priority rather than evaluated under the same criteria of explanatory scope, coherence, and parsimony?
So we know that people have intentions. We know that people have motivations. We know that people have psychological states. These are things that everybody agrees on. When a historian is doing history, the only way to do history is based on shared presuppositions. If you make an argument for a historical event that's not based on a shared presupposition, then you're not going to convince other historians because they don't share your presuppositions. For example, if you want to argue that World War II was won because the Martians came down and assisted the Allies, historians are not going to accept that explanation. Historians who talk about World War II do not talk about divine intervention. They just don't. Historians don't talk about divine intervention unless they're also theologians. And so some presuppositions are ruled out of court. It's not that historians are saying there's no divine intervention. And it's not that they're saying you can't believe in God. It's that they're saying that if you want a historical explanation, it has to be based on things that we can observe in the natural world because we don't have access to what's going up in heaven. So it's a different thing from mental states and such.
Jonathan, it may have been addressed to all, so I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to throw in there real quick before I go to the next one.
Yeah, I think my point, obviously, I think what I've demonstrated, at least from the ancient world, is they understood that they could be falsified. I think we have lots of examples where they were looking to these matters and falsified them. Obviously, I don't think a priori we could say, well, miracles don't exist, so there's no need to investigate them. I do think we need to put on our amazing Randy cape and look into, see how they can be subjected to falsification. But I think at a point, we do have to be open to dealing with the observable black swan to the naturalistic worldview. And I think from a historian's perspective, you have to deal with that reality that you do have to confront that black swan to your theory.
Can I just add to that? I agree.
Sure.
I agree there are things historians simply cannot explain. And I also agree you do not have to say miracles do not happen. I don't say that. I say that historians can't show they happened. It's a big difference. So I'm not denying that miracles happen.
Oh yeah, no, and I definitely don't.
No, I'm no. Yeah,
That's good. That's good clarification because I know a lot of comments were in the asking that on yours. So that's good clarification. Yeah. All right, Caleb Smith, 5102, one of our members. Thank you for the super chat. Question for both debaters. How does the willingness of the earliest Christians to suffer persecution and martyrdom for their beliefs attest or not attest to the resurrection in your respective opinions? Thanks. Jonathan, I'll let you start first, and then I'll let Dr. Eirman on that.
As far as their martyrdom, I think throughout I think we've seen this in lots of society. They have lots of different reasons. We're aware of a lot of different religious cults that they're willing to die for their beliefs. I mean, Waco and all these events, even in modern times. Is that sufficient evidence? Does that raise a presumption that this may be true? No, they're dying for their beliefs. Obviously, that's a state of mind. Now, obviously, I think it's something to take in consideration. But we have lots of cases throughout history where people are dying for a lot of different motivations. I think in a lot of the Greek epics and stuff, people are dying to save their brothers or their friends. So I kind of equate whether it's for loyalty or for the cause. I don't think suffering persecution for their belief attests to the resurrection. And I think Dr. Eirman would probably agree with me on that point.
Okay, Dr. Eirman.
Yeah. So, what you often hear Christian apologists say is that the disciples must have seen Jesus. They must have known the resurrection happened because they were willing to die for it. And if they had made it up, they wouldn't be willing to die for a lie. And since all the apostles were martyred for their faith, therefore, that's evidence that the resurrection happened. One reason that's not a good argument, it's an argument I used to make when I was an evangelical apologist, but one reason it's not a good argument is because the reality is we don't know how and why any of the apostles died. We have suggestions that Peter and Paul were martyred, but we're not told the reasons for their martyrdom, specific reason, nothing about the resurrection. And the others, apart from Peter and James, we don't know how the other apostles died. So when people say they were all martyred for the faith, that's a very common thing. But actually, we don't know. And so when somebody says that to me, I ask, well, why do you think that? Why do you think that? Well, I heard it. Right. Yeah. No, we don't know how they died.
All right. Thank you guys for that one. Cameron Lee, 07, $20 super chat. Thank you so much for your question. And it is directed at Dr. Ehrman. You said that any type of supernatural claim is historically impossible to accept, ? Correct me if I mistook your OS. However, isn't this presupposing something like naturalism? I hope y'all are doing well.
What I would say is that supernatural claims are impossible to historically establish as probably happening. It doesn't mean that you can't think they happened. And so it's not presupposing naturalism. It's simply acknowledging that historians are limited in what they can do with the evidence. We can't do everything with the evidence. Lots of things happened in the past that we cannot establish. Most things, the vast majority of things in the past, we simply can't establish. And miraculous events are some of those things. So I'm not saying they didn't happen. I'm saying that historically you can't show it.
Okay. And this next one is kind of in keeping with that. Dr. Josephus describes James the Just as the most trustworthy person. He is murdered for refusing to denounce Jesus. Isn't this good evidence?
It's good evidence that he really believed Jesus was the Son of God. It's not evidence there was a resurrection.
Okay. Let's see. Jonathan, do you want to add anything on that? Just take 15 seconds if you do. Just 15 seconds.
No, I don't think it's his belief system at that point that I'm going to die for my faith.
Okay. All right. And Cameron sends a $5 super chat for both of you. And Jonathan, I'll let you start on this one. What are your thoughts on the 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8 and Philippians 2, 6-11 passages? How early are they? I apologize if this is a lot. I would imagine he's referring to
I can do this. I can do this one quickly, Jonathan, if you want to think about it for a second.
Yeah. Knock it out. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
These are two passages that are often called pre-Pauline passages. Most everybody misunderstands what that means. What it means is that it appears that in these two passages, the first is about the resurrection, not just Paul says, "I delivered to you of first importance what I also received." That, and he goes on to talk about how Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and he was buried. He was raised from the dead in accordance with the Scriptures, and he was seen by Cephas. So that's 1 Corinthians 15. Philippians 2 is the Christ hymn where he talks about Christ being equal with God, but not wanting to be equal with God, but giving up his divine prerogatives to come down and to be a human, and then he was exalted back up to heaven. There are reasons for thinking these two passages are being quoted by Paul rather than composed on the spot. So that makes them pre-Pauline. Some people, most people, misunderstand that to say, even scholars, people who want to be scholars who write books about these things, say that if they're pre-Pauline, that means they were around before Paul converted. And that's not what it means. It means that he's quoting some pre-existent poem or literary structure or some creed, and he's quoting these things. All we know is that it is probable that these are quoting earlier passages, earlier like creeds or poems. All that it does show that probably Paul did not compose them at the spot. It doesn't show whether Paul composed them at some point, and it doesn't show when he heard of them. So they cannot be put into the very earliest of times. They might have been. We don't know. Simply, they're before Paul wrote Corinthians and Philippians. These things were in existence.
Okay. Jonathan, what say you?
Yeah, and from my standpoint, and it goes back to the point of my thesis, that the Christians were promoting this narrative, whether it was their propaganda campaign, which shows how they were building followers. They were promoting this narrative, which I was asserting in the very beginning, that after the resurrection, this became the marketing slogan. This is the marketing messaging out to the crowds. This is what's leading to the growth, which, to my perspective, even though, Dr. Ehrman described Pilate as this horrible person, he just let Christianity just go ahead and spread throughout his empire at that point. So that's why I look at it in the sense that it's part of the marketing campaign. It's what they've been promoting, which is consistent what we see, that this is what Tacitus and Suetonius And Pliny are talking about this contagious superstition is what Paul is reporting in Corinthians.
Okay. We're going to have to step on our answers quickly here, gentlemen. Jonathan, why, in your view, does Paul not bring the discovered empty tomb to the forefront of his argument in 1 Corinthians 15, especially if there were guards or linen wrappings remaining?
Well, so in Acts, when he goes before Festus and Agrippa, he did talk about Jesus rising from the dead. Now, what we get in Paul is dealing.
Let me. Specifically, he's asking from 1 Corinthians 15.
Okay, yeah. So Paul is dealing with theological disputes that are happening into the churches. So, I don't use 1 Corinthians as, hey, this is my resurrection case. What he's dealing with theological disputes, with the bringing in of the Gentiles. It's a way that he is sending out precedents and policies for the churches. So when we look at Corinthians and all these letters to the churches, what he's trying to deal with is theological disputes. He's already talking to a Christian audience that already believes these things. His focus in this material that's going out isn't designed to reconvince the Christians of what they already believe. So it's common as the rabbi for Christianity. He's giving his views on how we're going to organize the church, how we're going to deal with these theological disputes. He's not making his case for the resurrection that he did in Acts before Festus and Agrippa.
Dr. Irvin, you want to take a couple seconds on that one?
Well, it's just that 1 Corinthians 15 is about the resurrection. And what he's trying to demonstrate there is that the idea of a spiritual resurrection is inaccurate. That it wasn't just that his spirit came back to life. He's trying to show the Corinthians that it wasn't a spiritual resurrection, but an actual physical resurrection where his body was glorified. If in fact, and so he's trying to emphasize there really was a body. If he knew about an empty tomb, that would have contributed to his argument.
Okay. Good. Next one. Again, we'll move quickly here. Jonathan, this is for you. Take a quick. We got to hit the gas pedal. For Jonathan, ancient historians record miracles for other figures. Example, Vespasian. How do you reject those miracles while accepting the resurrection?
Well, in a lot of those cases, you're not dealing with a falsifiable event. It's sort of. I know Dr. Éirman brings up Baal Shem Tov. Going through space time. A lot of these visions that you have, they're not falsifiable. If I go back there, a year later, can I look into this? Can I speak to people? I don't have a falsifiable event where I can falsify. The difference with the resurrection is the report, at least, that we're asserting is there was a tomb. He appeared to people afterwards, and we had the Roman Empire and the Herods. From my perspective, that would have looked into all these things and quickly dispelled the uprising before anything happened. So Vespasian, these miracles those aren't falsifiable events. And so you don't have any means to falsify them.
I would disagree with this, by the way. I think the two miracles reported about Vespasian were completely falsifiable. They involved healings. For example, when he healed somebody who had a crippled hand, and to falsify it, you'd go to see if the man still had a crippled hand or not.
Okay. And we've got, all right, folks, we're going to have to cut off the super chats. We've got four questions left, gentlemen, and we're going to have to cut them off at that. But thank you for those that did do that. Dr. Éirman, could 1 Corinthians 15, boy, a lot of 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15, 3-5 creed be from Antioch in the 40s with appearances to the 12, a legend Paul didn't doubt. Because at 2-week, I think they try to fit all this into the question. Should have paid $15 to get all your words in. Meeting with Peter, they shared their solo visions of Jesus Christ, then focused on Gentiles and other issues.
Yeah, so I get it. And it's possible, but I don't think there's any. It's possible that that's right, that he got it from Antioch in the 40s when he met with Peter. That's absolutely possible. The solo meeting with their 2-week meeting wasn't in Antioch, though. It was in Jerusalem. But it doesn't matter. It's one of the possibilities. But there are dozens of other possibilities, and there's no way to evaluate which one is more likely.
All right, perfect. All right. I think that he's got back to back. I'm pretty sure. So yes. And then he continues, if bereavement vision led to resurrection belief, why not a single other report of an ancient apocalyptic Jew ever concluding a relative was resurrected from the grave?
Yes, it's a great question. And I don't know the answer. I wish I did. I mean, it doesn't disprove it. It just is, you might have thought that would have happened, but you do have lots of reports, by the way. You have lots of reports of people coming back from the dead in the ancient sources, by the way, on the basis of visions. I mean, ghosts and things show up all the time. And so, spirits and things. So, but I don't know. I mean, the question is why Christianity? And boy, yeah, if you can solve that one, you'll make $1 billion.
Jonathan, you got anything to add on that one?
No, I think.
Okay. All right. Let's go into the next one. Here's another. Dr. Ehrman, if the Jewish authorities had been allowed to bury Jesus, what kind of burial would he have received? Would Jesus's follower have known the location, and would his grave have been marked?
Very good question. It's hard to answer the question. If Jews were allowed to bury the body, they would have given it a decent burial with the proper ceremonies. We don't know whether it would be a known location. I don't think his followers would know, because according to Matthew and Mark, they're back up in Galilee. And so they wouldn't know. Would it have been marked? Probably not. Grave, it's not like today where everybody gets a gravestone with their name chiseled on it. So the authorities probably would have known. I'm not sure if they would have told anybody or if they would have even remembered. I think the big problem is that we think that everything's exceptional because we're talking about Jesus here. I mean, of course, it's going to be, people are going to know this was Jesus and they're going to pay attention. But to the Jewish authorities and to the Roman authorities, Jesus was just this guy from Galilee who's making these crazy claims that they've crucified with 2 other guys that morning. How many other people the next day or the day after that? And, they're just putting them in some kind of tomb, but if they are allowed to bury them. Roman policy is not to allow to bury them for days or weeks.
Okay. And I'm assuming this is for Dr. Ehrman. I think Mary Magdalene and others knew where the tomb was, and they believed Jesus was resurrected. They believed they saw him. Why would they believe in the resurrection if they knew where the tomb was and could verify it if it were empty?
Well, that's right. If the stories in the Gospels are correct, then yes, they would know the tomb was empty, and they would, that all would have happened. These stories are questionable historically. Do we have any outside verification that Mary Magdalene, for example, came to believe in the resurrection? All we have are these stories, and Gospels later depended on the stories, and later Christian authors depended on these stories. So yes, if Mary went to the tomb, if Jesus had been buried, if Mary did go to the tomb and had found it empty and did believe, yes, she would have spread the word. But that's precisely the problem, is that these accounts are, we have good reason for thinking Romans did not allow burials. If they did allow if they themselves disposed of the body, people wouldn't have known where the tomb was. We don't have any record from Mary Magdalene herself. We just have these stories about her from 40 or 50 or 60 years later. So it's not the kind of historical information that you could look for. But in other words, what I'm saying is, the premises of the question are, if the New Testament is true, then why isn't the New Testament true? But if you accept the premise that the New Testament is true because all the stuff about Mary Magdalene actually happened, then, well, yeah, it's true.
And to end it with the last question, it's going to come actually from me, because I think I earned the right to ask both of you the last question. And since I produced my own translation of the Gospel of Peter, I figured I would ask both of you, where does the Gospel of Peter play into any of this? Because it doesn't seem to be fully dependent on our canonical Gospels. There's a lot there about the burial and the resurrection. And, Dr. Ehrman, I'll start with you. Is there any reason to look into the Gospel of Peter to even continue kind of conversations like this?
Oh, yeah. Look, historians look at every source. I mean, it doesn't matter. We look at every source. And the Gospel of Peter, I date it to about the year 120. It has a terrific resurrection narrative, but I disagree that it's not dependent on the other Gospels. I think there's good indications that it knows the other Gospels and probably knows all four of them.
Sure.
But the resurrection narrative, for people who don't know or are listening or watching this thing, it is fantastic. The Gospel of Peter, unlike Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, actually narrates the resurrection. Mm-hmm. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he gets buried, and third day they find the tomb empty, but there's no account of him coming out. The Gospel of Peter, man. And so they got the guard at the tomb, and they're looking on, and these two angelic beings descend from heaven. The stone rolls away by itself from in front of the grave, and then these two beings go into the tomb. And as the guards are watching, frozen with fear, the three beings come out. Two of them are as tall as a mountain. The third one they're supporting his head is above the mountain, and behind them emerges the cross. And a voice comes from heaven and says, "Have you preached to those who are asleep?" And the cross says, yes. Oh, my God, it's fantastic. So it's a giant Jesus and a walking, talking cross. I mean, it's as good as it gets. So most people do not take this as a historically reliable account. And since it's based, it has clear parallels to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in various places. Most people think that it's not an independent report, although certainly it has stuff in there that is not independently reported in the others.
Good. Jonathan?
Well, I think in reports like this, with the Gospel of Peter first, obviously they were aware of the Gospel of Peter in the ancient church, and we have information on it. They're concerned that it wasn't received from Peter, so they wouldn't count it as canonical, something that was received through Peter. But I do think it has echoes of history that are consistent with what is being promoted in the Gospels. And so I think, if anything, going back to the tomb, it's another source that is consistent with the tomb narrative. Now, regardless of its evidentiary value, it does seem to echo a consistent message from the Gospels and other reports, even if it's heavily dramatized description of the events, just to say it nicely.
Okay. Oh, all right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We faced the uphill battle. We've made it to the top of the mountain. We can see the valleys below us. We are now at the very, very end. Great job. Good spirit, good cross-examinations, good presentations. For the most part, everybody in the audience did good. I had to text a few moderators to chill some of y'all out. But other than that, not too bad. Other than that, we did a good job. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us and having this discussion and debate. And thank you for all that are coming in. And I'll close this out. I'll put you both back stage. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks so much.